Hello, my name's Isaiah. Today we're going to be working on the CH240. We're going to be doing a heat exchanger replacement. So some of the tools that we're going to need to do this replacement is you're going to require a number 2 Phillips screwdriver, and ideally the longer the shank the better. And a little tip, you want to make sure that's magnetic. It's really going to help us down the line. We're going to need a pair of wire cutters. We're going to be cutting a bunch of zip ties all the way down here. And a pair of channel locks, very important. Some other tools that are going to be necessary would be a bucket, and you're going to require some rags. Just because as we're working on this, there's probably going to be some water spill and we don't want to create any damage. Before we get started on replacing these heat exchangers, some things you want to make sure to do. Go ahead and unplug your combi. You're going to shut down your domestic water coming in and close off your heating water coming out. And both hot and cold on each side. Also, be sure to go ahead and close off your gas line. Once we got all the valves closed off and this thing's unplugged from the wall, do your best to drain any residual water in the unit, because as we open these pipes up, there's going to be water pouring out and all that, so we want to make sure we drain this down to the best of our ability. We can go ahead and proceed by cutting these zip ties. What we're going to be doing is, in order to get this heat exchanger out of here, we need to get rid of some of these wires that are holding it in. So we're going to follow down right here in front of the fan. You have another zip tie. You keep going down a little bit. Here, right where this, right about mid heat exchanger, another zip tie. And now that we've clipped all the zip ties that are holding our wiring harness, we can proceed by removing our computer board. There's only 3 screws that hold this thing in. Okay, now that we got all 3 screws out, there's a hinge on the back of your computer board that you can hinge your board onto. That's going to allow you not to leave it hanging or putting too much stress on your wiring harness. What we're going to do is go ahead and follow these up and disconnect everything that they're connected to. Now, this would be a good time to go ahead and label each one of these, because we're going to be connecting them later. And something that's really important to remember is on these 2 solenoid valves, you can mismatch or crisscross the wires, which can create a big problem for you down the line. So these 2 yellow or mustard colored connectors or wires go to the back solenoid. These 2 red ones go to the front solenoid. So we're going to go ahead and unplug those now. You're going to have to get your hand back in there. So your solenoid wires are now disconnected. We're going to disconnect this black wire, which is your flame rod. So this black wire is going to go down, chasing underneath in between your burner and your fan. That's where your flame rod's connected or located. So now this section of the wiring harness is done. There's your air pressure sensor. It has a red, black, and white wire. That connects to the front of your computer board. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect that. Be careful with your computer board. Now that one's disconnected. And on this side, the last thing we have to do is go ahead and disconnect your ignition transformer, which is this blue wire here. So that should do it for the other side. These 2 white wires went to a high limit on your exhaust. I'm going to keep going down a little bit. We're going to disconnect this Molex connector to your fan. It's a pretty big plug. It's everything from a red, orange, black, white, and yellow wire. Then you have a high limit located on the side of your heat exchanger. Now, something to remember is this high limit and this thermal fuse on your burner here are wired in series. So the connection is going to go in through here, this brown wire, connected to one side of your thermal fuse, go around in a loop, come back out into your high limit that's located on your heat exchanger, and then go through that and then back out to this brown wire. So this right here, this brown wire connects to this black wire, which is going to be a little confusing later on, so make sure you're well aware of that. And then the other end of the brown wire connects to one end of your heat exchanger. You have your outlet temperature sensor, which is, on this one is white. And then your inlet temperature sensor, which is this black one. And the last thing we're going to disconnect is your water pressure sensor connector here, which is red, black, and green. So we've gotten all the electrical disconnected, and we're ready to move on to the next step. We're going to work on our combustion system here. So we got a series of hoses. We're going to get disconnected, and we're going to take off our gas tube here. So you got this skinny tube. You can go ahead and just let that hang there. And then right here on the side of this big tube here, your gas line, I'm going to take that off there. It does have a crimp on there, or it does have a hose clamp. You could use a channel lock or some kind of pliers to remove that, but usually you can get it with your hands. Okay, then you got a series of 4 screws on the top and another series of 4 screws on the bottom. You're going to get those off, and this gas tube should just pop right off. And now we're going to continue with this long, about 3/4 inch rubber hose that goes to your siphon and connects to the bottom of your secondary heat exchanger. So this one here on this model does not have hose clamp. So we're going to go ahead and undo that. So now just disconnected our siphon from our lower heat exchanger. We're going to go ahead and get this blower motor off, or our fan off. So what we're going to do is, there's 3 screws. You got right here a Phillips, looks like a stainless steel screw there. And then we got 2 gold screws here. One's pretty long and a little short one there. So let's get these 3 screws out of here, and we can get this fan removed. Now we've got all 3 screws removed. You can go ahead and just push the fan back, and it'll pop right out. Now that we've gotten everything else out of the way, we can move on to the plumbing side of things. What we're going to go ahead and do is disconnect our lower tube here to our lower heat exchanger. We're going to disconnect the supply tube, and then we're going to disconnect the return tube, or the outlet. So the inlet to your heat exchanger and the outlet. So there's 3 screws holding on this elbow, and there's a clip here that's holding on this upper elbow here. Now there's also as well 2 silicone hoses that we're going to need to disconnect that are connected to these 2 little brass thumb screws. So let's go ahead and get started here. These hoses, just pull them right off. Shouldn't take too much. That's one. There's one in the back here. I'm going to disconnect that, and then we're going to go ahead and unscrew our brass elbows from the heat exchanger itself. Set these screws aside, and you can just go ahead and pull it right off. And on the primary, or your upper heat exchanger, these clips, well, caught it. These clips pop right off, and then pull that right off. So now the plumbing is disconnected. You can kind of move this aside, and now we're able to start taking off the mounting brackets and some of the ductwork, and we're able to remove this heat exchanger. We're just about ready to pull this thing out of there. What we need to do, there's 2 screws. There's actually a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws holding this collar on here, but the ones that we're mainly interested in are the 2 small ones on the very top. We're going to unscrew those, which is going to release the collar from the exhaust duct. So this heat exchanger is connected to the exhaust duct, so we need to separate those. There's also, right here in this upper corner, right, there's a single screw that's connecting the exhaust duct to the cabinet, and there's 4 mounting brackets on both right and left hand side of this unit with anywhere from 1 to 2 screws that are holding this heat exchangers, or holding this assembly. to the cabinet. So now we got our 2 exhaust screws done, and this one in the back here. Don't forget about this one in the back. What I'm going to do to make this easier is I'm going to go ahead and get these ones that are kind of hidden on this side. So once you've done that, it should just slide right out. And we're going to start with moving over some of the parts to our new heat exchanger here. I've already taken the liberty and unboxed our new heat exchanger, and this is some of the hardware and seals that come with it. So what we have with our new heat exchanger, these are your burner seals. You got 2 sets. You're only going to need 1 set, so in case you make a mistake, they provided you with some extras. Some zip ties to put all our all those zip ties we cut for our wiring to reassemble that. An assortment of O-rings for our gas system and all our plumbing, if we want to change our O-rings out if we have a leak anywhere. A water tube for the outlet. So just because the heat exchanger is, the inlets and outlets are slightly repositioned. So we're going to need this new water tube. A slightly longer silicone hose for our bleeders. A new flame rod, because the old flame rod's going to have some buildup and some deterioration just over wear and tear. So it's always good to have a new flame rod. And all the hardware that we're going to need. What we're going to do to get this ready to go back into installation is, let me go ahead and flip these around. As you can see, all that we were provided was our primary and secondary heat exchanger with their exhaust duct. And what we're going to have to do here is, we're going to have to take off this burner assembly. And there's 1, 2, 3 screws here, another 3 along the back. This whole burner assembly is going to come off. We're going to clean off these gaskets that are attached to it. Clean those off to the best of our ability. Put that new burner assembly on the new heat exchanger, bolt it back up, and just put this one right back in the cabinet. Just be careful and remember on all the inlets and outlets of our new heat exchanger, you're going to have these caps as well. Doesn't really have it here, but some of them will have a cap on the condensate, so don't forget to take off those caps or you can have an issue there. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to start by removing these screws. In order to access this screw here, we're going to have to take off our ignition transformer. So there's 2 screws on our ignition transformer. Now I'm going to set these aside. There are different screws here. Now something to take note when you're doing this is when you remove your ignition transformer, here we go, it's got 2 wires that are connected to your flame rod. Right below it, you have your thermal fuse. And the screws that hold on your ignition transformer, I'll try to show it to you. It's going to go like that onto your burner. So you're going to take this off. Following that, you're going to have to remove your thermal fuse. I'm going to reuse that over there on the other unit. Now that we have removed our ignition transformer and our thermal fuse that was right behind it, we are going to take off the burner. Now something to remember, we do have the replacement flame rod, which goes right here, and I'll kind of swing this over so you can see the flame rod. So I would hold off on replacing the flame rod. The reason is as we're moving these over and shifting this and all that, if you bend these little bars, your spark will be cold or hot, or it won't detect flame properly. Gonna keep going here. Got the 3 screws off the front of the burner. Stand this up here so you get the 3 ones off the back. Now we're ready to just about transition over our burner to our new heat exchanger. Some of the things you want to make and take into mind here is This heat exchanger is only going to come with the lower mounting brackets here. The upper two mounting brackets that we're going to need later on, we're going to have to transition those over. So be very careful and take into mind the angle and the position. So you can put this on the opposite side, and then once you're putting everything back in together, it's going to be, they're not going to work because the bolt holes aren't going to align. So make sure, and see if I can show you on this one here. See the two holes on the upper side. If you were to put this on this side, the holes will be on the bottom side. They're not going to align later on in the cabinet. With the new heat exchanger design on this one to this one, what they've done is there's a little hole in the middle that no longer exists. The angle of your exhaust ducts and getting a screw jammed, it was pretty hard. So what they did was they eliminated this center hole on your heat exchanger. So when you transition over your burner, you're not going to be able to put that hole in there because it doesn't exist anymore. So just go ahead and remember that. Keep these together. Keep these in the correct position. And your burner should come right off. And very important to note is, so it has a sticky side to it, and you do not, absolutely positively do not want to attach your seals to the heat exchanger. The reason for that is on your burner, as you can see here, this venturi, or this little cutout here, is very important to the operation or the combustion side. So the air coming through here is going to come out through here. Now if you were to install your gaskets to the heat exchanger, when it bolts up, it's going to cap that hole. So that's why you want to make sure that when you put it on, you attach it to your burner and that hole still stays open. Also, in these corners, you want to make sure you butt the seal to the other seal as close as possible so there's no air gaps, so you don't have any combustion coming out. So we're going to go ahead and put our new burner. And again, as a reminder, this center screw hole in the back of the burner no longer exists. It's just too hard with the exhaust and everything in the way, so it's not going to be there anymore, so we're not going to have to worry about that. Now in the hardware provided for us, there's these burner screws. They have a flat washer. There's only a few of them, so they're kind of unique. The washer's built into the head. We're going to go ahead and pull those out. So as you're reassembling a lot of your heat exchanger, it's really good practice to go ahead and use all the new equipment provided for you, new hardware, new O-rings. Just because they have no wear and tear, they're new. It's just going to give some more life to your unit. So, anyhow, before I'm going to start just slowly getting these in there. I'm not going to exactly tighten them down. I'm going to just leave it kind of loose so we can still shift it around in case some of these bolts don't align. What I want to not forget is your mounting brackets. So get rid of these old screws as tight as I can get them before I feel like they're going to strip. Front screws. As you're tightening these screws, what you got to remember is you want to pass over it again. The reason for this is these gaskets are real spongy, so if you tighten a screw and then you keep torquing them down, it's going to start compressing this gasket and they'll get loose. So you want to go over it a few times. Next step is let's go ahead and get this flame rod swapped out. So there's 2 screws. Wiggle that thing out of there. And as you take it off, try to do your best to not knock any of the old gasket into the burner. The stuff won't burn off. So, all right. Get it as clean as possible. This is your old flame rod. We're going to set that aside. New flame rod already comes with new hardware, new seals. Just try to be as careful with it as I can, not to just pretty delicate, kind of fragile. New flame rods in. Just align these screws. The second one aligned. Let's tighten this up. Now that we've completely switched over our burner to our new heat exchanger, there's a couple things I want you to take note. On our new heat exchanger, high limit switch has been relocated. So now it's on this outlet elbow, and on the other unit, or your older heat exchanger, it was right here on the side. So it's a little bit of a change. That's about all we're really going to see here, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We've taken a liberty. We put the heat exchanger right back in. All you did was slide it right into the collar. There is two Phillips screws we tightened down that connects the exhaust duct to your collar. There's one Phillips screw that connects your exhaust duct to your cabinet, which is right there in that corner. And then there's 4 mounting brackets. We lined those holes up and put those screws in, and now your heat exchanger is where it belongs. When you're doing this, remember your thermal fuse bolts right behind your ignition transformer, like so. This goes here, and your ignition transformer right in front of that. Get that screw through both of them, kind of line that up. So thermal fuse and ignition transformer back installed. Now, your ignition transformer has 2 leads going on, about the same distance. So you can slide the boot off, and you can see the terminal or the connector, which has got to go to these 2 sharpened points on your flame rod. These are going to create your spark. I tend to like to slide the boot back. I can ensure and visually see that it slid on properly. Now that I know they're both on, slide the boot back forward so protects those and doesn't let any spark go. And now we got a properly installed ignition transformer. Wires are pretty tight, they're not pulling off. We're going to start by installing our fan. Should just slide right in. There's 3 bolts that hold it in. Got this stainless steel looking one that's a self-tapper. It's going to go on the top. Remember, you drill into plastic there, or nylon, so you don't want to overdo it. Long gold screw. It's going to go connect the fan to the body of your burner. And a short gold screw. It's going to connect this little bracket from the corner of your fan to your cabinet. Now we got our fan installed. We're going to go ahead and start doing some of our plumbing. So just as an example here, what we got here is the outlet of our old heat exchanger used to be down here. The new design of the new heat exchanger, we've relocated it. So this plumbing, this tube that goes down right along the side of your heat exchanger is not going to work anymore. So what we're going to have to use is the new tube provided for us. It's going to go right about there. I'm going to slide this clip out, and that's all that's holding our old pipe in. So pulling our old elbow and pipe, I'm going to remove that. Now what I do recommend is when you're replacing this pipe, it'll be a lot easier if you pop this clip off, put this elbow on, and then install the whole thing. Pull this elbow off. we can go ahead and install that now. When you're installing this thing, it seats all the way in, and the clip that's retaining it is underneath. This pipe's got to go all the way into the elbow, and there's a retaining clip. So if it tries to back out, it's going to hit that clip there. You want to make sure it's fully seated. Another thing to be very aware of is as you're installing this elbow on the outlet of the primary heat exchanger, this clip goes over these two flanges. You got to make sure that both your elbow and your heat exchanger, the flange on there, are completely seated properly and flat, flush against each other. Pop that clip over it and it should lock in those two flanges so they can't pop apart. Our old temperature sensor had a white lead. Our new one has a red lead or red wire coming out of it. My recommendation is unbolt the elbow, put the new elbow on, and then bolt it back in. That way you don't have to bend or have any issues along the way. Let's get these 3 screws out. So you got your O-ring, and there's a spacer. The O-ring does not go on top of that spacer, it goes in front of that spacer. Our new elbow off. Take this clip out, slide that right out. Pop this one. We're going to want to go ahead and reconnect the lower little silicone hose to that brass thumb screw, and it's kind of in the back. Make sure that's all the way seated there. Now, the longer of your 2 silicone hoses is probably not going to reach. It's short. So what they've done in our replacement heat exchanger kit, they provided us a longer hose. So we're going to go ahead and pull this hose right off. I'm going to take off our old tube. And we're going to install the new one. Now that we've installed the lower section of our silicone hose, should be long enough to reach right up here and go onto your brass thumb screw. So we got our 2 bleeders or brass thumb screws connected to our siphon through a silicone hose. There's one in the back here, don't forget about that, one in the front here. Go there, we're going to move on. So the condensate just slides right on to the nipple. We're going to start working on the combustion side of things. We have our gas tube, which is right here. And in our new heat exchanger replacement kit, we got these new gaskets or O-rings, and it just says gas pipe O-ring, so we know which ones we're dealing with. Also in our hardware kit, it gave us new screws for our gas line, so we're going to go ahead and change those out to the new ones. There's a little groove these O-rings sit right inside of, making sure they're not pinched, cracked, torn. Now that we got a gas tube, we want to make sure this little nipple that sticks out is going to be facing the cabinet. Well, there we go. We're going to install our 4 screws. We've completely installed our gas line. We changed our O-rings and upper and lower flanges, made sure that we had a good seal, and made sure none of our screws are cross-threaded. We don't have any issues, especially because we got raw gas going through this tube. So we want to make sure it's all seated well. You have a clamp here, which is, a hose clamp, but usually you can just push it right back on. You shouldn't have too much of an issue. So that's the bigger of your two hoses. Well, there's a few hoses, but larger one. Then we got a smaller one, and that one's we're gonna fish that one up inside. And there's a little nipple sticking out of the top or the plastic side of your burner. So go ahead and push that one back on there too. We're gonna go ahead and start hooking up some of our electrical, our two wiring harnesses. I'm gonna start on this side here. Just kind of follow my way up. So we'll start with these. Your ketchup and mustard connectors. You got your yellow and your red. And as you can see, yellow goes in the back almost. Forgot. So when you install these connectors, they should snap. They're locked into place. We have your black wire here, and this goes to your flame rod, which is clear on the other side of your burner. So it's going to go right under. We have our ignition transformer, which is this large blue wire. Finally, as far as it goes on this side, we got our air pressure sensor. That's going to plug in right to the front of the board, right where this yellow sticker is, right below that. And one of the things about our computer boards is every connection on our computer board is unique. So you can't crisscross, mismatch, or plug it into the wrong area. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't go there. Now we're going to go to the wiring on the other side of the unit. We're going to start our way up on the top here, and on our exhaust duct, these two white wires, these longest ones you have, we're going to fish around there, but they're going to connect to your high limit right here on your exhaust duct. Following down those two white wires, you got this big connector, and this here is going to connect to your fan. This is your yellow, white, orange, black, and red wire. Now we have two brown wires. One of them is going to go into our thermal fuse behind your ignition transformer. So the brown wire is going to connect to this black wire, which is a thermal fuse. And then coming out of the thermal fuse, that's going to connect to your high limit on your heat exchanger outlet. And then your other brown wire is going to connect there. We have a red, green, and black wire. That's going to connect to, make sure it's properly plugged in. That's going to connect to your pressure sensor. To temperature sensors. Now, one is black, one is red. So we're going to go ahead, and you can kind of tell which one's which because it's a little bit longer and shorter. The connections are the same, so you can crisscross them. We're going to make sure everyone goes here to your supply. So we got them all connected properly. What I want to do before I zip tie this thing, I want to install my board again. One more screw, and this board is secure. So now our board's back to where it belongs. Take our Navien zip ties again and start zip tying this thing back together. Now, something you want to ensure that when you're zip tying these is if you pull the zip ties too tight, what it's going to do is pinch these lines, And these lines are really critical to the operation of the unit. This is how the unit knows how much fuel and how much air is going through there, by measuring the pressure inside of this. So if you zip tie it and you wrench down on it, what's going to happen is you're going to pinch these two hoses. So take that into mind as you're putting your zip ties in, and make sure you don't pinch those. So what I like to do is put one zip tie not on the hoses, just on the electrical wiring. Go ahead and get that there. The zip tie I'm going to use over everything, over the hoses. I'm going to leave that loose. Just enough so these hoses aren't bouncing around, but not enough to pinch them. And this concludes our heat exchanger replacement. I hope this video helps you out in the field. If you need any additional help or anything else, feel free to call the Navien Tech support line. Thank you very much.